So hi everyone, I'm Swan. Currently a product manager for the full stack team at Evmos. I actually joined Evmos about like 3-ish months ago, so I'm really excited to finally meet people in person from the ecosystem. And yeah, so thanks a lot for coming out today. It's the last workshop, so thanks for hanging in. Yeah. So anyway, like I said, I'm currently a product manager for the full stack team at Evmos. My team works on building out a great experience for users who interact with and use Evmos, or more specifically, our dashboard. But definitely not limited to it, because as we all know, UX doesn't just start and end with a web application. So today, I'm going to be giving you an overview of EVM extensions, what they are, what they mean to you as developers, what they mean to your end users. I'll also review some use cases to kind of like solidify our understanding of EVM extensions. Yeah, but before that, let me actually get into Evmos itself for those of you who don't know. So if you don't know, Evmos is a layer 1 blockchain that basically combines the best of both worlds of the EVM and Cosmos. The EVM allowing for composability and programmability basically helps ensure an agnostic way of building out and writing out these applications and getting them to interact with each other. Whereas in Cosmos, like, it allows you for more of sovereignty, right? So like sovereign chains, governance processes, etc. Most chains, if not majority on Cosmos, are on the proof of stake consensus mechanism, I believe. And that helps with the scalability and the interoperability of layer 1 blockchains on Cosmos. So how does this all tie together with EVM extensions? EVM extensions basically brings more optimization to these two worlds of Cosmos and the EVM, and allow both worlds to tap into each other's interoperability, into each other's ecosystem by leveraging the existing interoperability of Cosmos and the programmability of the EVM. So as you could tell, that was a lot of buzzwords and fancy words in just one sentence. So let's try to break it down together and try to understand it. But first, let's look at the problems that we're trying to tackle with EVM extensions in the first place. One of them being onboarding is really, really hard for end users. So as you know, with every chain comes with its own native token, its own functionalities, its own features, the different dApps, different kinds of on-ramps, etc. And for those who aren't actually as crypto native or crypto savvy like myself, not just too long ago, it's actually really hard to know where to even get started on learning these things. Like imagine like if you're on a chain, you start familiarizing yourself with what that chain offers, different functionalities, all the different applications, but imagine you have to onboard yourself again separately to all these different chains that you want to learn about. The knowledge transfer isn't as like smooth and as seamless as you'd like. You know this pain. I definitely know this pain. I don't even know how I got through my first months of onboarding because this experience is really broken. And it's one of the bigger problems of Web3 relative to Web2. So what we see at Evmos is we see a world where users don't necessarily need to onboard to so many different chains separately, but we want them to just onboard to one, still get to interact with other applications and functionalities from different chains. So we want to tell our users like, hey, come to Evmos, get started here, have access to everything in the Cosmos ecosystem in one single seamless user journey without breakage, and without leaving where you started or where you're the most familiar with. So the second problem is a lot of applications are actually cross-chain and they're not multi-chain. So previously, we just talked about how end users need to onboard separately to so many different chains multiple times. Now imagine that, but for you as developers, you deploy an application to multiple chains multiple times. Like just imagine that. Like this not only puts more work on you on deployment, right? And all of the wonderful issues that come with that process, but it also prevents your ease of access to more users and more community, or more communities in a much more scalable and efficient way. So honestly, isn't it the more sensible thing to just deploy once, not think about it, and have all the users be able to access your application, regardless of whichever chain they're on? It only helps with the end user experience. It also helps with your deployment process, making that scalable and much easier for you. Like you shouldn't have to put in more work into the deployment process than in you writing out these applications for your users to use. So How exactly can EVM extensions help, right? So with EVM extensions, we basically want to enable dApps to be scalable and be powered by the interoperability that already exists in Cosmos. So as I mentioned earlier, remember, like we want to leverage the fact that that Evmos is the combination of both worlds of the EVM and Cosmos. Without EVM extensions, we already know this world, right? EVM smart contracts are limited to and confined to the logic of the Ethereum virtual machine. Yes, EVM smart contracts can talk to other smart contracts on EVM chains or even on Evmos, but they wouldn't be able to access any data, input, functionalities outside of that. But now with EVM extensions, these smart contracts can now access further core protocol functionality on the Cosmos protocol. So like such as like voting, staking, and even access to IBC. And that then would allow these smart contracts to interact with other chains on Cosmos. This is like a very big game changer because this was obviously not possible before. What we're doing is we're basically allowing these smart contracts on the EVM to directly call the underlying protocol of the Cosmos SDK, which then allows us to have users and developers don't leave the familiarity of the EVM and just to access core protocol functionality. So to kind of clean this all up with EVM extensions, now smart contracts can talk to other IBC-enabled chains. And at some point, we also want to have smart contracts be able to talk to other smart contracts that aren't on EVM chains. Cool. So that was more of like the conceptual overview of what we're doing with EVM extensions. Let's kind of like try to solidify our understanding with these use cases, one of which you're probably familiar with staking. So you can probably optimize staking with, for example, indexers, right? Like think about indexers that automatically would redelegate your tokens according to your preferences and criteria. Maybe you really care about validators who are spread across a different number of regions, or maybe you really care about like certain eco-friendly practices that you want validators to use. It's like what have you. It's like the personalization is the beauty behind these EVM extensions and their use cases. Another example would be staking managers to manage your staking position, or you could also run and deploy liquid staking derivatives by accessing the staking functionality that we already offer in our EVM extension module for staking. And we're definitely in an IBC summit, so I have to talk about IBC-enabled use cases. This is a really exciting one, the liquid staking outposts. So for Stride, if you don't know, it's a liquid staking zone. It basically allows users to send Evmos to Stride. The user can submit a liquid staking transaction. The user would receive the liquid stake tokens back, and then they would do whatever they want with it, right? But now, with EVM extensions, what the user can do is they can stay on the Evmos mainnet. They can send an EVM transaction to a smart contract with a note that basically says like, hey, I want you to perform an IBC transfer. Because when Stride receives an IBC transfer, it has a logic that it needs to do this liquid staking transaction and send the Evmos or the liquid stake tokens back. So essentially, what I just described is an outpost. That's when you're interacting with a smart contract on Evmos. So just from an end user perspective, just think about it. Like everything happens in the background. All the user is doing is just clicking on one button and they're getting the output. Everything in between all the manual steps, it gets hidden under the hood. So essentially, we're trying to like model like the Web 2 UX experience by basically not bothering the end user with details that they don't really need to know about, right? Cool. Another really cool use case is these DEX outposts. So this touches on liquidity, which is one of the hottest topics in this industry, right? So with this one, smart contracts can also use EVM transactions and use this to swap tokens and provide liquidity. So the basic idea here is that now anyone can send Evmos through, like, for example, an osmosis outpost with the instruction like, hey, I want you to swap my Evmos for Osmo and return it back to Evmos, or whatever other functionality that this outpost would be provided by osmosis. So the reason why I brought up this use case is that, like, essentially, in addition to bringing a lot more optimization via these EVM extensions, we basically want to enrich the DeFi ecosystem on Evmos. We already know that Evmos allows, developers to tap into interoperability, programmability, scalability, smart contracts, what have you. But we also want to make sure that liquidity is not fragmented, or rather siloed to just one single chain. We're pretty much familiar with TVL, which is total value locked, which also means the amount of tokens that are locked to a single chain. It's actually worthwhile questioning the accuracy behind that definition, because if you think about it, liquidity is literally spread across the whole ecosystem among so many different chains and different applications. So now with these EVM extensions, we actually want to redefine what TVL really means and ultimately allow dApps to access that liquidity spread across all these chains and applications via these EVM extensions. So basically the whole summary here is that yes, with EVM extensions, we want to provide this optimization to the functionalities that we already have, power it with interoperability that we're already trying to leverage within Cosmos, and then make dApps more scalable and more accessible to users, trying to relieve the lives of our developers and our end users alike. Cool. So I don't know if you caught this, but when I was learning about this, I actually got confused between an outpost and an EVM extension. Just a quick clarification, an EVM extension is at its core low-level infra, whereas an outpost is more on the top. It's the direct use case that you can give to chains for to offer these different functionalities. Just to get that clear. Cool, so the dApp store, this is really exciting. So our team at Evmos, we're looking into improving this onboarding experience for end users, this deployment and scalability issue for our developers. And once we tackle these issues of onboarding and usability, we want to tackle the issue of discoverability. We're thinking of providing a platform where end users can now search for and get exposed to all these different applications along their user journey, and also give exposure to the developers creating these applications and also getting rewarded for it by some kind of revenue model. We haven't hashed out all the details for this yet, but the concept of this is something that we're really trying to look forward to and trying to get closer to after we tackle the initial issues first. Okay, cool. So that was the conceptual part, a little bit of the application part. Now let's actually talk about how this looks like in real life with some real life examples, aka some cool hacky projects that the hackers of the Evmos ecosystem have accomplished. We actually have material in our docs and our academy that you can use and go through to learn more, so feel free to look it up. I'll also have some QR codes at the end that you can also scan, and then you'll be directed to it. So also bear with me, my engineering team is not here in Seoul today, but if you have any technical questions, we can talk about it after, and then we can see if we can figure it out together. But if it's a little bit more detailed than necessary, then I definitely am happy to toss the question to the team, connect you with the team, and I'm sure the team would be happy to answer your question. So we are currently part of the Dora Hacks Hackathon until June 15th, I believe. And there are actually some teams that have implemented this IBC transfer extension module into their own dApps. So let's take a look at a few and conceptually consolidate our understanding of these EVM extensions. So the core team at Evmos, they've been creating and working really hard in creating this IBC transfer extension module for no loss lottery. And actually some hackers adapted the original example code that we gave them and made it into a fully functional dApp, one of them being Evmos. So if you're not familiar with no loss lottery, to put it briefly in this context of staking and IBC transfers, the rewards that you accumulate each day make up this lottery pool. You can always unstake your original investment, you won't lose it, but you'll definitely lose out on the lottery. You won't be able to participate. That's the generic concept. So in this case, where the IBC transfer module is configured to send rewards to my account on Osmosis, what Evmos implemented was, let's say I'm number 3, and let's say you're number 8, and let's say we have 10 people in this room, and each person stakes 1 Evmos each, yeah? So what Evmos implemented is, let's say the lottery ticket comes out to 3, great, I win. Then with this IBC transfer module, the whole idea is that I will be able to withdraw my rewards directly into my account on Osmosis. What does this look like without EVM extensions? It's actually what you would imagine. I would get my reward, I would get it sent to my MetaMask account. I would go on the Evmos dashboard, I would trigger an IBC transfer from the dashboard. I would still have to actually onboard to Kepler because I noticed that like I have to send it to my Kepler account on Osmosis. Then I have to learn about Kepler and how awesome of a wallet it is. And then at some point I would receive my reward from step 1 into my Kepler account on Osmosis. Now, with EVM extensions, we want to optimize this process by getting rid of some steps. So it kind of looks similar, but I would get my reward and I would directly trigger an IBC transfer. I still need to onboard to Kepler because MetaMask doesn't support Cosmos chains yet. And then the reward would go directly to my Kepler account on Osmosis. Now in the future, we definitely want to optimize this even more by simplifying it, where I get my reward, I directly trigger an IBC transfer, and it goes directly to my MetaMask account. So this is really possible in like, I guess, 2 scenarios. 1 where MetaMask supports Cosmos chains, or 2 via an outpost. And I believe actually from the recent announcement with MetaMask snaps, like they implied like they would support Cosmos chains. So yeah. So the benefits here are actually twofold, right? So like one for the end user and one for the developer. For the end user, finally, it's easier to onboard themselves, like have access to everything in Cosmos in just one single user journey without breaking it, right? Like they no longer need to onboard to new tools, new things that aren't as knowledge transfer friendly. And now for developers, yeah, it's easier for them to onboard users to IBC, but now it's also easier to onboard themselves to IBC. With EVM extensions, we want to make it that they don't have to learn about IBC transfer from Go, nor do they actually need to understand all of the implementation details of this module in Go. They just need to understand everything at a more high-level, conceptual level of IBC transfer, such as like, you know, porting between chains, having a relayer, making sure that the packets arrive, etc. So also from a liquidity perspective, now devs can just deploy on Evmos and access any liquidity on other chains. And if you think about it, this is actually a lot more appealing than just copying and pasting contracts to other chains, especially if they're programmed in a more restricted way that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, and this is ultimately just less overhead for developers. It makes their lives so much easier on deployment, and also just doing all of this in a much more scalable and efficient way. I actually didn't put them up on the slides, but I also wanted to give a shout out to some other really cool projects from the Dora Hacks Hackathon. There's one called StakeWise, and it's basically a staking manager that allows for automated delegations to different kinds of validators with one click. So whether they're like bottom validators, top validators, or random validators. So what happens here is that when you withdraw rewards, you can include IBC transfer to send a portion or all of the Evmos rewards to your account on Osmosis. Another really cool project is called the HackHound. I think that's the team, and their project is called SweetFest. They don't have a front-end app yet, but it's really cool. It basically allows you to have a portfolio for IBC tokens and keep it balanced using your Evmos staking rewards. So for example, let's say my portfolio is 50-50 between Evmos and Osmosis. It would use my staking rewards and some calculations to balance out my portfolio by swapping the Evmos reward for other tokens, so via the IBC transfer extension. So there's a lot more cool projects from the Dora Hacks Hackathon. Those are some of the very few, but I'm pretty sure there's like even more that came out of the hackathon. Cool, so if you want, like, these are a list of EVM extensions that we have in our docs. You can scan the QR code, it will lead you directly into the docs. I'll keep that on there for 3, 2, 1, cool. You can also go into our docs in our Academy. Docs is more developer documentation focused. Academy is a little bit more on the educational side. We're still working on adding some content to Academy, but feel free to go check it out, give us feedback, also add to it if you want. Cool, so that's basically the end of my presentation. If anything, like we're really excited about these EVM extensions because that takes us like one step closer to making the lives easier for both devs and end users, like stop with this fragmentation and making it a little bit less painful for both end users and developers. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, thanks for coming.